Bonito City, a rather grand name for the cluster of log buildings that housed a saloon, post office, schoolhouse, church, general store, a hotel called the Mayberry House, and a number of comfortable residences. Set amid lofty peaks 12-mile northwest of Rizzuto, apple orchards and livestock of the Bonito settlers flourished in the 7,000-foot meadows at the edge of the forests. Trout fishing was excellent in the Bonito River. God was in his heaven, and all was right with the world, or so it seemed, when two events took place that would cause the serene and pleasant community to literally disappear. The centerpiece of Bonito City was the 2-story log hotel called the Mayberry House, operated by Mr. and Mrs. John Mayberry. They had 3 children, John, Eddie, and Nellie. On the night of May 5th, 1885, the Mayberry House leaped into the record books with one of New Mexico's most bizarre crimes. Earlier that evening, a number of miners ate supper there and left. Only 2 guests had rooms, Dr. R. E. Flynn from Ohio, and a youth named Martin Nelson seemed to be pleasant and inoffensive roomers. All were in bed by 10 o'clock. About 1 o'clock in the morning, Nelson arose and knocked on the bedroom door of the 2 Mayberry boys. John awakened and opened the door, at which point Nelson fired 2 rifle shots, killing him instantly. He then turned on the 7-year-old boy Eddie, who was screaming in bed. Nelson killed him with a single blast. Dr. Flynn, hearing the shooting, rushed from his room and was shot through the head. John Mayberry, after hearing the screams, was making his way up the dark stairs from the first floor when a shot through the heart dropped him on the landing. Blood was everywhere. Mayberry's daughter, Nellie, appeared and was shot through the side and left for dead. She later recovered. Miss Mayberry ran upstairs where Nelson shot her in the chest, but failed to kill her. She stumbled downstairs with blood streaming all the way to her feet, leaving bloody footprints visible on the stairs, even years later. She fled to the nearest cabin for help, but Nelson followed, executed her, and threw her body into an irrigation ditch. Nelson, the saloon keeper, no relation to Martin Nelson, appeared on the scene, grappled with the youth, who was no match for the murderer. Mark Nelson shot him to death and left his body bleeding in the sandy street. The next victim was a storekeeper, Herman Beck, who came out to learn the cause of the gunshots. Nelson killed him with 1 bullet. Bonito's terrified citizens locked themselves in their homes until morning, while Nelson roamed at large, finally climbing up a nearby mountain. Next morning, as Charlie Berry, Rudolph Schultz, and Don Campbell were standing in the street discussing the murders, they sighted Nelson returning down the mountain. He saw the man, brought up his rifle to fire, but was an instant too late. Berry failed him with a bullet through the heart. Nelson's last shot went harmlessly into the air as he fell. Total fatalities were 8 killed, including the murderer, and 1 wounded. It was years before the people of Bonito City recovered from the shock, and for 15 years, nobody set foot in the log hotel. Folks said it was haunted, told stories of shrieks and groans in the dead of night, of seeing lights flicker from room to room, or hearing muffled shots. Those who peeped through the dusty windows could see the bloody footprints left by Miss Mayberry's feet. The murderer was buried at Bonito, with his head pointed down. Folklore say that this custom was to prevent the buried persons from walking as a ghost. The victims were also buried in Bonito, side by side of each other, and a reasonable distance away from the murderer Martin Nelson. Gradually, Bonito City died. The final blow came when the railroad arrived in the desert below and took a businesslike approach to acquiring water rights in the Bonito Valley, and later on, buying out the land in which the remaining residents of Bonito City lived. In 1930, Bonito Dam was built by the Southern Pacific Railroad. The remains of the victims were moved to Angus Cemetery. A large stone marks their resting place, and as for Bonito City, it is presently resting under 75 feet of water that is now known as Bonito Lake. Since then, Bonito City has become an old memory and a murder mystery of the past. Some people have claimed that during a well-moonlit night, they can see the top of the church steeple shining below the serene resting water of the night. Is it really the church steeple being seen 75 feet below the water's surface? Or is it a haunting image, reminding us of the presence of the city below? You decide. In early November 2006, I went over to visit my grandparents' house and my grandpa wasn't feeling well. He eventually went to visit the hospital. I thought he would just get out in a day or so, because he survived a heart attack before. For the first few days I wasn't worried at all, but after a week in the hospital, I was getting a little worried. About 2 weeks later, he passed away. I was absolutely devastated. Before his funeral, his brother and sister came down to visit. While they were sleeping in my grandparents' house, this is 2 days after he had died, my uncle was leaving. He looked back to see if things were all right, and saw a rather tall figure, wearing a hat, walking in our room. At first he thought it was my grandpa's brother Robert, but he was fast asleep in a different story of the house. He went looking in the room, and the ghostly figure was gone. We all think the figure was our grandpa. He was about 6'1", and always wore a hat. Every time my grandma went to go get food, or to pick up my little cousins, we would get a feeling someone was watching me, but in a good way. In early December, I was decorating the Christmas tree, and I saw a face peek out at the top of the stairs at me. It looked exactly like my grandpa a few years before he died. It kind of feels like a little bit of him follows every one of us. All of these accounts have happened in Lake Havasu, Arizona, each in a different house. My mother and I were driving around town, looking for a house to rent, when we found a large house on Bayou Drive. This house was an old bluish color, with vines creeping up the outer walls and into the fireplace, with a large overhang on the front porch. As soon as we started walking up the driveway, a very strong feeling of dread started to creep through my body. I really liked the house, so I ignored the feeling and continued into the backyard. As I entered the backyard, I remembered a dream many months before. The exact backyard was in my dream, and the images of death and demons filled my mind. My mother had the same feeling, so we left without another word, deciding that a door had opened and a demon was dwelling inside the house. We moved into a different house where everything felt normal at first. We lived there for 7 years. I soon felt eyes watching me in the shower, which then led gusts of freezing angry wind rushing past my face and arms. Later I learned my mother was going through the same events, only she experienced only one of the gusts of wind. When we started talking about moving out of the house, things got worse. My mom once felt a figure sit down on the bed beside her and saw the indentation of the person on the bed. There were no dogs in the room, and the entire house was asleep. I saw blinds move and nothing in the room, and a shadowy figure walk across the kitchen. I was cleaning out a house, just about to move into it, when I repeatedly saw a figure of a little girl out of the corner of my eye. I could sometimes hear her talking softly to no one in particular. Later investigation proved that a little girl had drowned in the pool years before. I've had a lot of things happen to me in my life, from seeing eyes in the corner of my room to being slapped by something I couldn't see, so I'm very open to anything and everything that someone would think was weird or crazy. My mom, however, is not, so for her to tell me about what happened to her, I know it's true. I'm 28 now, and this happened a few years before I was born. My mom was an FHA teacher for 15 years, so she went to FHA meetings a lot. One night she was at a get-together for school, and it was getting late, and as she was getting ready to go, one of her friend's cars wouldn't start, so my mom said she would take her home. As they were driving, her friend and her were talking, not even thinking about how far out in the middle of nowhere they were. Finally, they got to her house, and my mom dropped her off and started home. It was a very calm night, and very dark, almost eerily calm. As she was driving down the road, she started to feel uneasy, so she tried to blow it off, until she turned down back road to the highway. I can't think of the name of the road right now, but I do know there was quite a few fatal accidents on that road because of how windy it is. So, as she was driving, she looked over and saw this thing running right beside her. It was as big as a cow, and its eyes glowed green. She got so scared, she stepped on the gas and was going 85 miles per hour. And the thing then disappeared. It was almost as if it was there like a flash, and it was gone. She never found out what it was, nor did she ever go down that road again. But she figured it might have been a banshee or something, after a long look at things. She has only had 2 things ever happen to her in her life that she definitely couldn't explain, and that was certainly one of them. The other was when she went to bed one night, when she was a teen. She just got into bed and looked over at her closet, and there was something that looked like a man floating with a glow around it coming at her. She ran and told her mom, and her mom told her it was nothing. So she went back to bed, and she saw it again, and ran out and slept on the couch for the rest of the night. I'm a clairvoyant, and I'm used to not being alone. The last house I lived in had a number of distinctive entities, and will only share a couple of my experiences with you now. There was a young girl, probably around 4 or 5, who was very prevalent around the time my son was 3. One night, I had a contact dream. Usually my dreams are surreal and nonsense, but when I contact someone, they're usually set in whatever house I'm in and are more out-of-body experiences. I walked to the end of my hall and looked through the dining room into the kitchen, and there was a small girl with waist-length dark brown, not black, wavy hair. She had a flowered white nightgown on, and she was pushing buttons on the microwave. When I asked her why she was here, she quickly, and I mean quickly, like Japanese horror across the room in a blink quickly, came up to me. I crouched down, but I couldn't see her face, and somehow I knew she had been badly injured. Think gunshot wounds to the eyes and cheek, so I didn't want to see her face. I explained to her that she needed to move on and go into the light where her family was waiting, and then I walked back to my room with her following behind me. I woke up, then went back to sleep, and a while later my son woke me up, halfways anyway, enough to answer him and kinda remember. And he asked me to tell the girl that she was not his sister and to leave him alone. I told him to lay down in my bed and explained to her she was about 3 feet away, that I'm not her mother, and that she needed to move on, that it wasn't her house anymore. I thought that part was a dream when I woke up, until I realized my son was asleep beside me. The other very noticeable energy in my house was that of a woman who was very straight-laced and controlling. She would often sit on a window seat in my bedroom at night. My husband, who is a very skeptical man, would sit up in his sleep staring with closed eyes towards her and ask over and over, "Who is that? Who the heck is that?" Until I would tell him it's okay. Then he would lay back down. Well, this house was in Oklahoma, and every time there was a tornado weather outside, she would panic and really become agitated and very distracting to those who could sense her. So I'd have to calm her down and watch the storm. When my alarm clock didn't go off, she would bang loudly on the window in time for you to get to work. The only nice thing she would do. But when we were moving out, she really flipped, stirring up whatever else was there. So in the middle of the night, I would hear floor shakings and bangs from completely empty rooms. Tape would be peeled off boxes and placed across the room. Things would be removed from boxes overnight and put in different rooms, like books stacked in the middle of the kitchen after they were packed, and sounds of the TV coming on after it had been unplugged and wrapped in protective sheeting. All in all, it was not a very fun move, especially when I was alone the last 4 weeks of packing, and she kept opening the valve on my air mattress at 2 a.m. My new house is nice, but I keep hearing a little boy talk to me from a corner of my bedroom. Oh well, I guess. I'm 25 now, and have had strange experiences which, though I'm very analytical and skeptical, can't seem to find out how, or why, or what these things were. I will tell each encounter as simply and as accurately as I can. I used to live in Stockton, and my house was built around 1910 to 1912. I was an only child, and my parents were very busy doing their own things. I may have had an overactive imagination, but I don't believe so, because what I saw was too clear and not vague and reinterpreted by my brain. The sliding redwood doors that separated our living room from the dining room began to shake before my eyes, as if it was locked and someone wanted in. I got up and walked around to the other side, thinking it was my cat, but I didn't see her paw, and she never shook the doors, just nudged them apart. I walked around to the other side of the doors to the kitchen. All the lights were off, and I saw no one. I felt very scared suddenly, and went to bed, closing my door. Another time I was laying in bed, and my mother was on her hands and knees sniffing the floor. A bathroom connected our rooms, and I assumed she had begun sniffing in the bathroom. I asked her what she was doing, and she replied, "Your father and I smelled rotten blood." I can't remember what happened first, but I saw a clear apparition in my living room as I tied my shoes. A man dressed in black with a top hat and coattails, had a cane with a black long beard, walked briskly through the living room, and disappeared. I had a dream that I pulled the back out of the carpets in my parents' bedroom and saw bloodstains. I don't know if she was moving them. She denies it still to this day, but I know I wasn't moving them because I was determined to find the truth. The board told this story. A married couple named Mark and Melissa Twain lived in the house with a woman's sister. One day, in jealous outrage, she killed them both in the room with a shotgun. I thought it was very fishy the wife had my name, and the husband's name was Mark Twain. Like I said, my cousin says she didn't make the Ouija tell the story. I was under the house one day, bored and playing around, when I found a small handful of large blast bullet casings. Not as large as a shotgun casing bullet, I don't think. Other things have happened. I heard a knock on my door late at night. One huge knock, but I was too scared to open it. I told my father in the morning, and he got very angry and shouted at me that I was too stupid. I don't know why that angered him. I surmised the knock was from my dog changing lying positions on the porch. Once a baby bottle just sitting on the counter just seemed to be thrown in the floor. My father said it was because I stomped into the kitchen. Perhaps. But the powerful way it fell, I doubted it. I was never able to tear my parents' carpet or find any information on the house that could point me in any direction. Though I did get all the paperwork on who owned the house, and no name Twain ever owned the house. My aunt, who claims to be a psychic, came over to the house and said that several ghosts live here. That was something I didn't hear myself. Another family member told me that. The house, which was always a bit odd, had a stained glass window on the front, not very large. It was of a cross. Later in life, I was in high school, living with a friend. I was trying to go to sleep and heard someone say my name very clearly right next to my ear. I got up and asked my friend what he wanted. He was in my grandmother's room, which they shared. "I didn't call you," he said. The voice didn't sound like his voice. It had a lisp, as was very girlish sounding. We went to the house in the Delta, abandoned and run down, as well as vandalized. I walked ahead of everyone, always ready to take on whatever. As I walked past a bush, these birds just exploded from it. Before, I heard no bird song, and they surprised. The house was elevated with a basement that had openings for water to flow through. Everything was pretty much ruined. A door opened nowhere, as the staircase had been brought down. It felt like a cemetery, not in a morbid sense, just so quiet and hollow. We went to the basement, where trash was everywhere. On the door, which had been removed then, placed back up, was a crude black painting of a devil or satyr. Being mischievous, I took a wooden bed frame topper. It was painted brown with a carved flower on each side, and it was painted red as well. After I took it home, that's when I heard the voice. My room was cold, and I saw something in the garage, and I had a really weird nightmare. The kitchen was being renovated, so we had to wash and get dishes in the garage. I went out to get a cup and felt very nervous in there. As I was walking to leave, I heard a loud boom in the wall to my right. I looked, not too long, but long enough, and this will be a very hard to explain situation and sound crazy, but this energy waved and glistened in the shape of something human, turned its head and looked at me. I ran out, scared for my life. I'd never been so scared. I took the bed knob back, and nothing happened like that again. The site has long since been destroyed. I'm not sure what any of this means, but I do know one thing for sure. I experienced it. Both of these accounts took place within the same week of each other, happening to my brother and I when we were on vacation in London. The Hyde Park Ghost. I was on vacation with my family in London for Thanksgiving, 2001. About 10 in the morning on Thanksgiving Day, we decided to go for a walk around London, starting with Hyde Park, which was about 3 blocks from the hotel. The park was beautiful against the autumn sky, and both my brother and I found it strange how time seemed to skip, as the park just lay kitty corner from a highly modernized tourist strip. As we waited on the corner for our parents to catch up, I turned to see a great black carriage standing behind us, pulled by a glamorous-looking brown and white Clydesdale. I tugged on my older brother's jacket and pointed, and we watched it for a while, thinking it was the coolest thing we'd ever seen. Others in the park didn't take much notice of them at all, walking by in a hurry to get wherever they were going, or that's what we figured. My brother, having his camera with him, took a picture of the carriage and the driver, a slightly portly man with a contented smile and a formal air. He looked at us as my brother snapped a picture, and I felt an unexplainable tingling. Shrugging it off as the autumn weather, I continued to watch the driver. Our parents called our names, and we turned back to look at them, agreeing that we should all go for a ride in the carriage. My mom asked what we were looking at, and I turned back and pointed. What happened next is the strangest thing I've ever experienced. There was no carriage standing on the corner with us. My brother just looked as puzzled, and we continued the search about the corner, thinking it must have driven off after we turned to look at my parents. The carriage, driver, and horse were nowhere in sight. I found it odd also that we had not heard them drive off, as one would think a horse walking on stone could not be terribly quiet. A week or so later, we got the film developed. My brother and I searched through the pictures at least 3 times, trying desperately to find the one he had taken off the carriage. But though all the exposures from his camera were present, we could not find the one of the gleaming black carriage, Mary Driver, and the magic Clydesdale. We did, however, find a startling shot of the corner it had been on, with a little glowing orb just right center. My brother and I prickled. The real start, however, did not come until about 2 days after that, When I was reading a book about the ghost of London, I'd picked up at the Tower of London for some light reading. I felt the same familiar prickle as I read about a popular ghost in Hyde Park, that of a man driving a gleaming black carriage pulled by a huge brown and white Clydesdale. The shadow in the chapel. A few days after walking in Hyde Park, my brother and I were wandering quietly through Westminster Abbey, enjoying the sights. We walked into the chapel that was open and sat for a moment, waiting for our parents to catch up. While we were there, he said he smelled something burning. I sniffed the air, recognizing the strong smell of incense. We looked around, not seeing anyone else in the chapel. My brother poked his head out the door, and he looked around, informing me that no one was there, and no one was burning anything nearby. Thinking this was strange, but not terribly creepy, we hung around in the chapel a while longer, chatting quietly. Our conversation was broken, however, when we heard someone chanting from the front of the chapel. We jumped, thinking we were alone. I looked up towards the front, certain we had been alone. The chanting continued in a foreign language I didn't understand. My brother, a Latin student, said later the chanting was a prayer or something. We stood there, watching the front of the chapel, looking around for anyone who might be chanting. I nearly fell over when I saw someone flicker to my left, a figure wearing a dark robe and moving slowly walked in front of us at the head of the chapel. I remember taking a sharp step backward and falling into my brother when, after a moment's reflection, the being looked up and straight ahead. We couldn't see its face as its profile was towards us, covered by the robe's hood. That didn't matter, however, as in an instant, the being was gone. There was no more chanting, no smell of incense, nothing but me being supported by my paled and terrified-looking brother. We didn't know what to think, neither of us thinking too much of ghosts before, but neither of us could really explain it. One minute, someone standing right in front of us, and the next minute, it was gone, completely and utterly gone. Not a trace of it. First story. I was 11 when this happened. I was spending the night at my best friend's house. It was a pretty Victorian house. It still had the original barn. It was in the back. But anyway, one night we were staying up well past our bedtime, down in the living room, watching TV and talking. Well, our room, which we were supposed to be in, was directly over the living room. Well, we were sitting there, and all of a sudden, we heard what sounded like something being dragged the length of our bedroom. It was something heavy. We were so scared, so we stopped talking and muted the TV to listen. It sounded almost like a dead body. All you could hear was thump, thump, slide, thump. It was freaky. We checked on everyone, and everyone was asleep. In my second story, this is my fiance's story. He's in Germany right now. He would probably be mad at me for telling this, but I have to, because it scared me. Anyway, he's not the type of guy to get scared very easily. He doesn't believe in ghosts. We live in a town called Tacoma. It's south of Seattle. Anyway, a port town of Tacoma is Lakewood. In this town is an old insane asylum that was torn down about, guessing, 30 years ago, and then rebuilt across the street. Go figure. It's called Western State. My fiance and a couple of his friends went to the hospital for the fun of it. The ruins are still there. They were down in the basement, which also happens to be the boiler room. They were walking down there and came around a corner and saw a bunch of bugs and such. They figured a bum was staying down there. As they turned to leave, Dave is a pretty small guy, so he got pushed to the back. As he was about to leave himself out of the window, he felt someone tap him on his shoulder and heard someone whisper something to him. He figured it was the bum, so he turned around, but there was nothing there. He freaked out because it was a split second that he'd heard something and felt the tap. So he started screaming for his friends to come and get him. His friends had to pull him out of the window because he was freaking out the whole time. A third story. I was sleeping one time in my bedroom, and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I suddenly woke up because I had the feeling that someone was in the room with me. I had my own room at the time, and it was pitch black in my room, but I looked in the corner where my door was, and I could just barely make out the outline of a man. He was just standing there and watching me. I couldn't breathe or think. I just stayed there for about 2 minutes, trying to figure out what to do. I finally got the balls to reach over and yank on the lamp. When I did, nothing was there. Fourth story. Me and my sister were at my grandma's visiting, and recently, my uncle had passed away in the house. He had gone missing for about 2 weeks. My grandma didn't think anything of it, because he did that sometimes. She went in his room looking for something, and there he was, lying on his bed, half decomposed. She said it took forever to get the smell out. On my grandma's TV was a plastic face with a flake flower in it. The TV was off, and my grandma was at work, so me and my 2 sisters was sitting around and talking. I believe we were talking about my uncle when all of a sudden the vase went flying off the TV. When I say flew, I mean flew. It flew like 5 feet. We all stopped and decided to go to bed. Fifth story. I was spending the night at my best friend's house. I was like 15 or something. My godmother had just told us to go to bed. We were just getting ready for bed when I hear my godmother yelling at me to get my butt in bed. I came out of my best friend's room and said we were. She then proceeded to tell me that she had seen me in the reflection in the window walk by from the stairs to the kitchen, but the room we were in was right next to where she was. Freaky. The sixth and final story. I was babysitting my nephew one night. I was sitting on, listening to music and relaxing, when I heard my sister laugh. Thinking that was weird, because I hadn't heard them come home, I got up to check. There was no one there. I know my sister's laugh. About 30 minutes later, I heard my sister cough. Again, I got up to check. Nothing. I don't know much about this house. I've only been here about 8 months. It's my brother-in-law's house. This house is kinda weird though. When all sounds have died down, you can hear clicking and sometimes even what kinda sounds like walking sounds. I sleep with my door open, so I would hear if my sister had opened her door. But they're like soft walking sounds. Odd. Anyway, I have tons more stories. I'm a very strong believer in ghosts, so if you want to hear more stories, just email me and let me know. Phantoms. So, I know I wasn't able to get a video out yesterday, but I made it up by doubling the watch time on this video by giving you guys 40 minutes of ghost stories. So please, just for that alone, please take a moment to share this video, like it, comment below, and tell me which stories you like the most. I'm telling you guys, if you're not subscribed, you have to subscribe more, because I don't even know why I said subscribe more, but if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to me. Let's get to 28K and beyond, and let's just enjoy, because Halloween is right around the corner, and let's celebrate all the stories in this video tonight. Guys, thank you so much for being a part of the Phantom Wagon, the darkness, whatever you want to call it. In the comment section below, let me know what kind of candy you like for Halloween, since it is Halloween coming up soon, like I said. And I sound like a broken record, I sound like I always sound the same. But guys, I really appreciate your viewership, and I really mean that from the bottom of my heart. You guys are awesome, and there's no better time to be telling you guys stories than on this day. During this month, with all the Halloween hecticness going on, we can't really enjoy life as much as we want, but we're gonna have a fun Halloween. So guys, love you. Don't forget to leave a comment. Let me know in the comment section below which stories you like the most, as I said. And the darkness is about to leave. The darkness has left the stage. Exit left or right. Anyway guys, love you and good night.